The South Winn Warrior girls wrestling team will have two wrestlers competing in Coralville this weekend at the girls' state tournament. Head coach Ethan Adams joining us. And Ethan, you got Caden Meyer and Maddie Jansen through last Friday. Before we get into the specifics of their performance, just that super regional in Mason City, you've been involved in wrestling on the boys' side for many years before taking over on the girls' side at South Winn. How much of a physical and a mental grind is that super regional?
It's a long day. There's a lot going on, and I think the girls' union is doing a nice job of gathering information from last year, putting it into this year to make it a little bit better, a little bit more concise experience for the ladies. And we were fortunate kind of to fight the weather. We went out early, and so we were able to get up a little bit less early, get in from the hotel in Mason City and compete. I think it's just with 5-6 matches, 4 or 5-6 matches can be such a long day. And obviously with the guys changed to their district, it's getting similar in 1A and 2A as well. Yeah, I think we were fortunate with our administration letting us go out early to fight the fog and put us in a good position to be competitive that day.
And we're going to break down Caden and Maddie here momentarily, but just collectively as a girls team, how much better did your team get from the start of practice in November to last Friday?
Oh, it's really big. We still had a lot of new wrestlers this year. Last year was obviously significant with everybody, new program, new sport. This year we had, I think, six or seven returners, 6 returners with experience. So that made a big difference. We were able to pull everybody kind of along maybe a little quicker than we were last year. But it's still difficult sometimes to see those steps. Some of your less experienced wrestlers, they might be getting a lot better, but they're still taking those losses or taking those bumps along the way. And so getting committed to that process, I am getting better. I am, seeing these techniques and having little goals in each match made a big difference. And then as far as that, it was really with some of our upper level 3-4 kids. It was how do you weather the peaks and valleys of what becomes a very long wrestling season. There are girls, which for good or bad have 65 plus matches going into the state tournament. You're not often going to stay all up for that whole season. And so just kind of having some girls bounce back late and do a lot of their best wrestling here at the end was fun to see. And I think really a positive thing for those ladies.
And with the young women that were new to the sport of wrestling, how do you go about selling to them that things are moving in the right direction independent of results?
Oh man, if you can give me the answer to that question, I'd love it. I think, you do tell them a lot of the same things and you try to spin it as many different ways as possible so you don't sound like a broken record. But I think it's clear to just try to point out as often as possible when you see those little things and set good goals for each match. Saying, hey, I'm going to go focus on this thing. I'm going to move my feet really well. And, no matter what, then the first question we can ask when we come off the mat is, hey, how'd you feel you moved your feet? I felt like I moved my feet really well. It's like, awesome. Then you set a goal and went out and accomplished it. And, within that, there's going to be the frustrations of, I still took a loss. And how do you then tomorrow at practice, let's attack that thing that resulted in that loss or one of those things that maybe, compounded to contribute to that. And so, yeah, that's kind of the $1 million question is how do you keep people bought in when they're taking those negatives? But it's just trying to be as committed to the process as possible, saying, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to get better. And I can't control how good that girl across from me is. And so if I'm getting better, then it's positive, and I've got to believe that and move forward.
And we'll talk about the two that you qualified for state, both Caden and Maddie going back to Coralville after qualifying a year ago. Let's start with Maddie's story because her story, a pretty impressive one based on what you told me last Friday.
Yeah, we were obviously able to catch up on the way out the door, and I was still pretty fired up. Without
Yes,
getting too far.
I can confirm that for the record.
Yeah, it's kind of what does he say in the Hulk? That's my secret, Captain. I'm always a little change. I'm always fired up. Yeah, so Maddie at 135 was a little banged up there the last couple of weeks, really the last week prior to regionals, and we weren't. It was kind of touch and go if we thought she was going to be able to compete. I might have even lost some money if you had bet me a couple of days beforehand if she was going to be able to. So we were fortunate. Appreciate her work with our trainer Heather and Winn Med to get her going and everything as well. Get her taped up. I just think a lot of people kind of don't realize how hard it is maybe to wrestle without one hand. And I shouldn't say without because I don't want to discredit anything she did that day. But it was just a very gutsy performance. I think she was able to wrestle pretty close to not her ceiling maybe, but what she had that day. Maybe she was at whatever percentage, she gave 100% of that, and beat some really quality wrestlers from some quality programs along the way. I think just, to your last question about how do you get people bought into being process minded, and how do you handle adversities, right? This sport is kind of hugely adversity based. There's a lot of adversity, and her ability to, I think, look coaches in the eye, and I've had the privilege to work with her on the track as well, and kind of look at her coaching staff and say, "Yep," and you believe that she believes you, and that's pretty big, and that's pretty fun. Is seeing a kid just genuinely be bought in, and I think that's where kids can start to jump levels, and I think where we can maybe move the needle with athletics back in the direction I think a lot of people would say they want it to go, is getting these kids to value those right things, and that's believing in themselves, their coaching staffs in that process, to where we are getting the right things out of athletics, which is becoming better, adults and kids like that. So,
And Caden Meyer, what's made it a successful season for her?
similar in the adversity thing. Her record obviously is pretty good, but the thing that she would tell you is that she wants about 4 of those matches back pretty hard, if not more. A lot of that came in the last 3 weeks, and so the thing with Caden that was really awesome was it was the kind of the culmination or exclamation point. I kind of put that in my message to the newspapers, was she was a nice exclamation point on that day. For her, it was a different kind of ending though. Like, it was 2 weeks of really trying to build back some self-confidence and get some of those, and it was wins and losses based, but I think how she was wrestling was frustrating her. I think she would tell you that, but man, just getting her on the right track started a couple weeks ago with some duels that we were able to pick up, and getting some more good wrestling under her hands and feet. And then that's a girl that we had lost to earlier in the year. We were winning that match and wound up getting put in a big move and losing that. And so I think we believed we were better, but for her, that was just like the final stamp on, I'm headed in the right direction. I'm going to Coralville wrestling my best, and flipping a couple results late in the season was a big part of that. So she was another good example of what we're talking about, of being bought in, because we had some hard conversations about what we wanted to get out of the end of the season, and why we wanted, why she wanted those things, and what they all meant. And kudos to her for being open to those kind of tough conversations about, we're taking bumps, how do we climb back out of this hole?
And you bring up a very interesting point. It's easy to have the conversation of what you want to get out of a season. The why you want to get it is a different conversation. How are those different?
Well, I think, this is probably a conversation for a whole like hour-long podcast or something, but I try with our coaching staff, and I think Coach Ellsburn on the guys' side, and we kind of keep our programs pretty close. We try to have what the athlete wants in mind as much as possible. I think that's important. We have some just in these 2 girls, really great and supportive families, and we have lots of conversations about what they want and why. And I think that these kids are all fairly intrinsically motivated. I think when you start to get into some trouble, and not necessarily with these 2 athletes, is when we get extrinsically motivated, like those things. And these are conversations that these 2 girls and I have had. Is what why are we doing this? And I think you just try to preach those things from day one. You get into the kind of awkward conversations about being adults and parents and workers and coworkers and things like that, and what you're trying to get out of a sport, and why. And you just hope that they catch some of it, because obviously they're not gonna, they're young, and they're learning their own way. And so I think if you can get them to understand why it is they're doing something and why they should value it, they'll impress you probably more often than not. I think we're pretty fortunate, at least with our girls.
And Caden and Maddie both were at state a year ago. They returned to state this year. How much is that previous experience? How much do you think that will help them going to the big stage once again?
I think it can only help. There's obviously going to be a lot of girls that were there. There was a pretty young state tournament last year, with it being a new sport. You didn't pick up a ton of juniors and seniors right out of the gate, but you picked up some freshmen and sophomores. And Maddie was a good example of that last year. Caden, a little bit of a different example of kind of the journey woman along the way, put in her time, and now it's sanctioned. But we actually already talked. We met yesterday and went through some of the itinerary for the weekend, and that was what they both kind of mentioned was, hey, this is what we kind of did last year that maybe we want to tweak or do differently so that we're better prepared. Just kind of after weigh-ins, we want to make sure we do this, get back to the hotel, blah, blah, blah. I think more than anything, similar to what I mentioned with regionals, just being comfortable and ready to compete. That's the goal. Is you try to take it, first point, next point, last point, one match at a time. And with having some experience with these two young women, they're going to maybe find that a little bit easier to get to instead of being distracted by some lights and sounds and things like that.
In the practice and the preparation and the getting ready for state this week, what's going to be the main focus with these two as you get ready to wrestle on Thursday?
So obviously we long day Friday, took a break Saturday, getting together some grocery stuff and things like that for the week. 3 practices, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Yesterday was kind of the conversation piece of, hey, here's what we can improve on, because it's a pretty short amount of time. Here's what we want to be focused on as far as what we're doing. Maybe a couple small things that we can be aware of. You don't want to get too bogged down in what other people are doing or your opponents. But so yesterday was a lot of implementation of technique. Shout out to Abby Wagner, who's our 130 pounder, who's their practice partner. Perfect attendance. She's there every single day, shows up. So she was there kind of getting asked to do a lot of things and be in a lot of positions yesterday. And then today is going to be, hard drill, those things, nothing new. And then Wednesday's taper, focus, get comfortable, compete Thursday, Friday.
And what's it going to take to have as much success as possible come Thursday and Friday in Coralville?
Win matches. Yeah, I think showing up focused on the right things, match to match. Seeds are important to a tournament. They're not important to a wrestling match. You got to try to ignore that and show up and compete to the best of your ability. Like I said, how are we moving our feet, how are we moving our hands, scoring with a purpose from every position, trying to score that first point, the next point, last point, and so on. I know it's kind of coach speaky, but obviously if we can be confident in ourselves, I think we can be in all of the matches that we wrestle. Down there, like you said, there's a lot going on. It can sometimes get easy in the middle of a match to almost maybe forget, like get caught up, and then all of a sudden you get yourself in a bad way. These girls are all pretty talented. You don't want to let a match get ended early that you maybe would have had a shot in the third period. So staying off her back, staying in good position, and just being prepared to wrestle in all 3 spots.
Ethan, thanks for the time. Congrats on a great season to this point. Hopefully it becomes even greater, and Caden and Maddie can climb the ladder as high as possible come Friday night. We wish you best of luck.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren. I appreciate all you keep doing for these local sports and athletes.
Ethan Adams, South Winn Girls Wrestling, 2 wrestlers going to be in Coralville Thursday and Friday.